Hi there, everyone. Everyone good? Right. Well, kia ora everybody. Can I begin by acknowledging the Royal Commission's report into abuse in state care? It is their interim report, but it does have some pretty sobering findings. Can I acknowledge the victims who have participated in this process, I acknowledge how difficult this will have been for them, and thank the Royal Commission for the way it has handled the process. I know they've worked very hard to ensure that it's been a very victim-centred process. The report clearly highlights that there have been some intolerable and unacceptable abuses in state care in the past. That is something that all New Zealanders, I think, will be concerned and alarmed by, although it confirms what the victims have been saying for some time. The government has already been taking steps to respond to the work of the Royal Commission as that has been undertaken, including changing the Crown's litigation strategy, which we have already done. We will, of course, make further decisions between now and when the final report is received, but it is the final report that will ultimately have the recommendations, and so we will await that before making, if you like, further comment on what might happen in the future. I think when the government set up the Royal Commission, we did so because we knew that there had been abuse in state care, because we knew that it was likely to have been more widespread than had been previously acknowledged, and because we believed those victims deserved to have their voices heard. And of course, because we think it's important that we understand what happened, why it happened, how it happened, and that we put in place protections and steps to ensure that it doesn't happen again.
So were you as shocked as the Commissioner's liable dollar figure about the actual, putting aside the trauma and the hurt, actually the monetary impact of this?
I think regardless of what dollar value you put on it, we should never underestimate just how traumatic the experience will have been for the victims. And we should never underestimate just what a long legacy that abuse has left for them, for those around them, and in fact for the country as a whole. So regardless of how you quantify that, whether it's a dollar value, an emotional harm allowance or some other form of measurement, it is unacceptably high.
Minister, the interim report is highly critical of the Crown, saying it employed aggressive tactics in court, used strategies to discourage others and withheld information from complainants. Do you apologise for this?
What's clear is that over time the Crown has spent a disproportionate amount of its energy defending unacceptable behaviour rather than taking a victim-centric approach. That's a strategy that we have already changed, and we're continuing to work on that, to look at how we can have a more victim-centric approach when it comes to dealing with these types of historic issues. Whether an official apology will be issued from the Crown is something that the Crown will make a decision on once the final report of the Royal Commission has been received. But I certainly think all New Zealanders will be sorry that this has happened. This is not New Zealand at its best. This is New Zealand at its absolute worst. I think we will all be horrified by some of their stories. Look, I think that is a decision that the Crown would make after receiving the final report of the Royal Commission, but I certainly think that the victims have been through a horrible and horrifying set of experiences that does need to be acknowledged, and I'm sure it will be.
On changing the Limitations Act, what specifically has been considered there?
One of the things that I know victims have found difficult is that the limitations have meant that they haven't been able to bring forward their complaints. That's something that we'll look at. I don't want to preempt that. I know that that's something that the Royal Commission themselves are going to be looking at as they head towards their final recommendations. So it's important that we allow that to go through that process, but also we will continue in parallel with that to be looking at what changes we might think we could make. So we're not just going to wait until the final report's received.
And the report says compensation from state to survivors is inadequate. Is the government in a position to adequately compensate and rehabilitate survivors in the future?
So the issues of redress are ones that the government will be looking at in the new year. It's also ones that the Royal Commission will be looking at in the new year. So that's not dealt with by this report, but it will need to be dealt with.
Would you potentially look at government considering enforcement over faith-based care in that area? Because obviously they've been away from the government.
Look, I think that we have to acknowledge that the Royal Commission is still ongoing. This is an interim report, and I don't want to get ahead of the Royal Commission in terms of recommendations that they might make in that area.
Minister, are you open to setting up a dedicated independent body for people to go to in the future?
Sorry, there's a bit of noise, so I didn't quite hear you there. What was that?
Are you open to setting up a dedicated independent body for people to go to in the future?
Well, one of the things I think we need to acknowledge is that at the moment, for the victims, for the survivors, it can be a very difficult system to navigate, particularly if the abuse has happened in a number of different settings. So if they've survived abuse in care settings supervised by education, by Ministry of Social Development and so on. And so I think we do need to look at whether we can streamline that process, make it more victim focused. That's something the government will be actively exploring early in the new year to see whether there are further changes we can make there.
Māori children have felt the brunt of abuse in state care historically, and now Oranga Tamariki did come out and said that it's a racist system. Why should Māori families trust that the government has the best interest of Māori children now?
I think what you'll see from the fact that we established the Royal Commission is that we do acknowledge that the abuse of Māori by the state isn't just a historic issue. Actually, some of these examples highlighted by the Royal Commission are more recent. They're in our lifetimes. So we do need to take those seriously. We do need to acknowledge that Māori have been disproportionately affected, and we do need to make sure that we are looking to the future, and that will include looking at our current systems to make sure that we're not creating the environment where that abuse is perpetuated in the future.
When you heard those testimonies, what were your feelings when you read about the rape and the physical abuse? What were your first thoughts?
It was quite confronting. The reports were quite confronting, and I have to say I have not yet read them as carefully as I intend to, because I've only received them, I've only had them for a few days as well. I can say as a parent, as someone who is passionate about young people's development, the effect that this will have had on those victims for their entire lives cannot be understated or underestimated.
Should the financial implications then be a factor still for the Crown when it's considering redress, compensation, support, mental health services and so on?
Yeah, look, I don't want to get ahead of the decisions that we will make, and also I do acknowledge, the Royal Commission's still got its final report to present, but there will be further change in that area.
We've talked to a data specialist, and he says that about the estimates and the number of children abused in care. He says it was irresponsible for the Royal Commission to release the figures given there's so little data on the number of children in care historically and so little on the ethnicity. What's your response to that?
Yeah, like I said, I don't want people focusing on the numbers, the potential financial numbers, to in any way distract from the fact that this abuse was real, that it's had a significant impact, that impact continues to affect people today, that we do need to change the way we deal with these situations. I think that's very clear from the Royal Commission's report. As to what they choose to put in their report, the Royal Commission, they get absolute freedom as to what they choose to put in their report. But I don't want the debate around how you might quantify that in terms of number values to distract from the very, very real issues that are being raised
So
here.
you're comfortable with the way that it's come out in terms of representing the whole picture without maybe that official data underlying it?
I think one of the things we've got to acknowledge is that the data here is not great, that often record keeping has not been good, that trying to quantify exactly the extent of the issue has been a real challenge for the Royal Commission.
This was one of your children, one of your nieces, one of your nephews. What would you say is a satisfactory redress for them?
Like I said, I don't think there's anything that we could do now that will take away the harm that people have experienced. It is unacceptable, it is wrong. I think all New Zealanders will be sorry that it happened. We do need to look at redress. That is something that the Royal Commission will be looking at in the new year, and of course the government will be looking at as well.
And the report says that some processes have not
I think one of the things that we have to do is we have to adopt a much more victim-centric approach when it comes to dealing with complaints. Our litigation strategy has been very much focused on defending the Crown's position rather than looking at what's in the best interests of the victims. That has already changed, and we'll continue to look at that to see whether there are further changes that need to be made.
And the obligations under fertility, will that be a consideration?
Absolutely, and we have to acknowledge that Māori were disproportionately affected by the events in question.
Is this one of the most confronting, if not the most confronting piece of work that you've ever embarked on?
Certainly, as in my time as a minister, it is one of the most sobering reports that I have ever laid eyes on. It is one of the ones that has taken some time to read, and I haven't finished reading it yet because it is one of those things that it's very difficult to read from cover to cover without needing to stop. And I think that in itself is a reflection of the weight of the report and what they're covering in it.
Have conversations began with the Finance Minister around the cost they're putting aside now?
No, we haven't done that yet. Obviously, at the moment, our focus is still on supporting the Royal Commission to complete their work. It's on supporting the Crown to respond to the Royal Commission. We still have to, be making sure that we're supplying with them with the information that they need from the Crown side, and I'm very much focused on lining all of that up to make sure that that's possible. Redress and costs and so on associated with that are not something that we have yet turned our minds to.
Victims can expect some movement on that.
Look, like I said, I don't want to get ahead of the fact the Royal Commission are considering that. They've not made recommendations to government on that yet. They will do, no doubt, in their final report, and I don't want to get ahead of their ability to consider that.
Minister, was this ultimately more shocking than you anticipated?
I think that, like many New Zealanders, I had understood that abuse had happened in state care. I think the fact that it was so horrific and potentially so widespread was something that I guess I might have feared, but to have it confirmed is still very confronting.
Is the government in a position to admit that there's a link between adult incarceration over the 70 years and abuse in care?
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, we know that those who are victims first often end up being offenders. I have one of the country's biggest prisons in my own electorate, and I can tell you that in the 12 years I've been a Member of Parliament, I have had reason to go and visit people in that prison, to talk to them about the stories that they have to share, that many of these people never have had the opportunities in life that others of us have taken for granted. They have often been victims from a very, very young age, and that has been a significant contributing factor to their own pattern of offending. And so we should never underestimate the long-term legacy that abuse in state care will have had, potentially intergenerational.
Is the government in a position to acknowledge links between abuse of state care and ending up with gangs?
Again, I think that is something that is likely. I haven't seen, the Royal Commission have not given us specific advice on that at this point, but I think those who are victims are often more susceptible to gangs and to other, criminal activity. Okay, thank you.